guess this is a very appropriate section on talking about the embrace of technology. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my absolute love for it, and, well, really more appropriately, why I'm not in Guantanamo right now. It all started over here. Well, at least this is where I found out about it. This is the Detroit airport. Some of you may have flown through it or regularly. It was back in June of 2002. I was flying back from a flight from, as an artist, you work all over the place, and I think as a lot of us that travel a lot, you don't really have a home most of the time, so you're on the road a lot. So anyway, I'm flying back in on a rather convoluted route, and the usual, you just hand the passport to the immigration customs, and from there, you just basically, the usual deal, he swipes the passport, and I realized something wasn't right. The guy behind just pretty much just froze, completely just turned white. Wasn't really sure what to make of it, but just kind of stopped for a second and said, "Is there something wrong?" And still no response from him, nothing. Took a few moments to recompose himself, and then basically said, "Follow me, please." And I ended up walking through a rat maze through the Detroit airport, and ended up in an INS detention facility, which is kind of ironic because I'm an American citizen, and American citizens and back then an INS, there's very little overlap between the two, particularly in terms of detention of American citizens by INS. Anyway, it's a large room, probably twice the size of the stage, people from all far corners of the globe, and you can just see, you can just see the fear in everyone's faces in this room. And unfortunately, and they just were not having a good day that day. This is their first day in the U.S., and you can just see that. You can really, I got really nervous in there. Anyway, sitting around, of course, I'm trying to start up a conversation with the guards there who are all in uniform, and they're just as confused as I am. They're like, "What are you doing here?" That was never spoken, but it felt that way. Anyway, after a few moments, just like the movies, this kind of dark suit walks straight up to me and says, "I expect you to be older," which I thought was a very unusual greeting. Yes, English is a second language for me, but I'd never heard of that one used as a greeting. So I said, "Well, no, gee," I tried to age as quick as I could. But and then he went on to say, well, and then of course I still don't know what's really happening here. So I asked him, "Do you mind explaining what's going on?" And he said something to the extent of, "Well, you got some explaining to do yourself." So we end up in an interrogation room, again, just like the movies, minus the dangling light. It's actually so stark white it hurts your eyes. Camera in the corners, desk, L-shaped desk, computer, him, me. And then over on the side of the computer, I'm noticing this screensaver. It says Federal Bureau of Investigation, Department of Justice. That's when I realized something wasn't good. And I still didn't know what was happening, but I knew that I was in some mode of suspect, and this was some mode of government official. And he says, "Okay, where were you?" And basically we started retracing my steps of every moment, every day, every hour. Who did I meet with? Who pays for your trips? Why? Everything, you name it, every little detail, even down to just asking things like, "Well, what did you eat on this day, Tim?" And then out of nowhere, he says, "Where were you September 12th? Hell if I remember, But fortunately, I have one of these yuppie devices with me, and I pulled it out and said, "Okay, let's look up my appointments for September 12th. We go to September 12th, 2001, well, meeting at so-and-so at this time, meeting at that time, class from this time to this time, paid rent at this time. Where were you the 11th? I said, "Well, I had these two meetings, but they probably got canceled. Where were you the 10th? Anyway, it was a pretty detailed listing. And then, I don't think he was really expecting me to have such detailed records. Out of nowhere, he asked me, well, he had a storage unit near the university. I used to teach in Tampa at the time. I was living there, and he basically, his question was, well, what did you have in the storage unit? Junk, winter clothes that I have no use for in Florida, furniture that I can't fit in my apartment, typical garage sale material. I'm just a pack rat, can't get rid of stuff. And he looked at me very concerned, says, "No explosives." I guess he was very disappointed that, but I said, "No, I'm certain I didn't have any explosives in there." He says, "Well, we received a report that you had fled on September 12th and you had explosives. Turned out that the owners of the storage unit, who had actually never seen what I had in there, but many, many, many months after I'd moved out, decided to call the police and say, this Arab man fled on September 12th that had explosives. This was right during the time Interstate 75 was shut down because of a waitress at Shoney's had heard about a group of Arab men planning to blow up Miami. So, we were being vigilant and being proud Americans and protecting our country and deciding to basically turn in anyone that looked a little funny. So basically, from then on, for the next 6 months, I had to pretty much justify each and every second of my existence to the FBI, frequently meeting with them back and forth, really just going through everything. And eventually, end of November, I was finally cleared. Well, there really wasn't anything formally to be cleared of, but anyway, we had to go through, 9 polygraphs repeated consecutively, one after the other, after the other, after the other. So yeah, in the end, I am cleared, so I don't have a bomb with me or anything. You can be rest assured of that. And now I'm older too, yes. So basically, and going through this process, it really does. It affects you in just more than one way, but really during this entire process with the FBI, when you're face to face with someone of that much authority of life and death, you don't really behave like a human being, and you revert to a very animalistic instinct, and that instinct is of survival. You do whatever you have to do to survive, and in my case, it meant cooperate, tell them everything. I mean, I could have basically said, screw you guys, this isn't legal, or even question the legalities of it and get a lawyer and get this all messy in the media. But I realized that probably was not in my best interest, simply because while they never outright and said this, but it was quite clear that it was one of those, well, you can do whatever you want, but we can take it to Guantanamo at any moment, and we don't have to explain to you for any reason what we're doing, why we're doing this. So that power structure was very clear and was very upfront from day one. So I just basically said, okay, well, what do you want to know about me? I started telling them everything. Anyway, so eventually after I was cleared, I started thinking, well, what am I doing? And I said, well, so I started, my biggest fear really was not a bomb going off somewhere or a building crashing down. My biggest fear really was the police, the authorities. How do I protect myself from them? So I decided to constantly report in what I'm doing. I would call the FBI agent that was working on my case and I'd say, hey, I got to fly this week. All right, what's your flight numbers? Okay, Northwest Flight 50 coming into Detroit on May 19th. Okay, no problem, got this taken care of. And then the following week I'd call them again and say, okay, I'm going again this time. Okay, where is it? And basically I'd constantly keep telling them and reporting to them where I'm doing. And I said to myself, this is getting a little difficult. So I said, well, why should he be the only person that knows? Why don't I just start sharing this with everybody? So I built this, I basically hacked my phone and built this ankle bracelet, which, by the way, I'm not required to wear one, but I wear one voluntarily. And it reports what I'm doing and where I am. So that's that little flashing arrow in the middle. That's Camden right now. We can zoom in a little bit. We can go all the way in. It goes down to 1 meter per pixel all the way up to 100 meters per, or 100 kilometers. So that's the Opera House right there, and we're kind of sitting around. It's kind of interesting seeing yourself as a pixel. But we're right there. So this way America can sleep easier tonight. But really, what it came out to was, okay, so I'm going to share this information with them. I'm going to tell them everything. I also decided to do some other things. Oh, actually, by the way, so we can zoom out a little further. You can see a few other things. It switches to a different database at a point. Or if you need a global perspective, we can go all the way out. And you can find out exactly where that is. Basically, what it's doing is it's tapping into the USGS database of maps that we have, your tax dollars at work. So at the same time, I also started, basically what I've been doing is I've been time-stamping my life every few hours. So every few hours you take a picture and you just basically, telling my FBI agent, look, I'm here, this is what I'm doing. A few hours later, look, I'm doing this, I'm here. So this updates quite frequently. So even down to the point where I started saying, okay, well, here's all the airports that I'm transiting through. And these are actually I have a habit of sleeping in airports. That's another project I'll tell you in a few minutes. But over there and over there. So a lot of these are very clinically documented and so on, but let me see. These actually pull up in random order. These are all the airports that I've slept in over the years. And for example, 5 days at Detroit. These are not consecutive days. These are all added up over time. We have, what else? We have 8 days in Singapore, 3 in San Francisco. I have a habit of sleeping in airports. What I've been doing is, for example, I'll fly into different airports, but I won't clear customs and immigration. And I just hang out in the transit area for several days, and I'll fly back. And I did this immediately after I was cleared. I flew to Singapore, and no offense to the 3 that are from Singapore, but Singapore and privacy issues and police state issues and such. I mean, there's a lot of issues there. Anyway, so I thought that'd be the perfect place to do this. So I flew to Changi and basically just hung out at the airport for 4 days and flew back. So the U.S. has a record of me leaving. They have a record of me coming in, and yet I don't exist anywhere for those 4 days in the middle. You just blip off the radar. And of course, this is exactly what they're looking for, people that do blip off. But really, when you start questioning these things of these geopolitical anomalies, I mean, yeah, you can say, yeah, you're in Singapore, but I really didn't exist in any country. And in the same way, it's similar to Guantanamo. Guantanamo does not exist on a political level. It is not part of the United States. It is not part of Cuba. It is not international territory. We don't know what it is. It's limbo land. And in the same way, by me going to these airports and just living in the transit zones and flying back, trying to go into this limbo land of this neutrality, which really isn't neutral at all, but trying to exist in this space. So, and that also talks a lot about the anonymity of these projects when you look at my timestamps. So this is every toilet that I've used. So this is the Pie in the Sky pizza restaurant in Windhoek, in Namibia. This, actually, let's go to some nice ones. What do we got there? Oh, it's a public toilet in Gothenburg, sorry. How about this one? This is at the Mombasa International Airport on the arrivals. And by the way, this is the floor. And then there's some really interesting ones like that. That's a fancy toilet. And then you get some really bizarre ones like that. Or, I'm not really sure what this first one is. But, so, I decided to share my information. And really what I started doing is I started fantasizing and thinking, well, what might be in my FBI file? And the reality is, I mean, if I understand the laws correctly, I don't think my file will be released maybe for another 75 years after my death, or something of that sort, to my descendants. And it's a little shady because, the magic wand of national security and terrorism was waved over this, so who knows if it'll ever be released. So I started thinking to myself, well, I'm going to just make these things, I'm going to start making lists and offering this. So obviously one of the things that I think the FBI would be very interested in is my flight patterns. This is every flight that I've been on since birth. And, and sometimes I don't remember the flight numbers, but I do know it was an American Airlines flight from San Juan to Fort Lauderdale and so on, and they go on for a while. But you can also see what I was doing on this flight. So that's what I had on there. This is KLM flight 658 going from Newark to Amsterdam. You notice that over there, by the way? You see that? If I had that in my bag, I'd get arrested, but it's perfectly okay for them to hand it to me. Is there some hypocrisy going on there? So anyway, this is also my alibi. Of course, I can call my FBI agent and say, hey, look, how could I have been possibly involved in that terrorist attack if I was busy on this flight eating this, or peeing in this urinal, or or eating this meal? So basically, what I've decided to document my daily tasks, but in a very clinical manner, in a very anonymous manner, where the viewer really is required to piece together bits of information with here and there and there and there and there. For example, we can actually go in a little bit more on these. Let me see if I can find a good one here. Oh, and then you can also look at the airports as well. So these are all the. So we can check out all these different images of Amsterdam, which I've also been collecting a lot of images over the years. And I'm sure some of these images have to be illegal because there's many countries that don't exactly like their strategic locations photographed. So that might be getting me in some trouble soon. So I love these soldiers that are hanging out in Bogota. So sometimes there's just one image, so it just gets repeated. But these are generated relatively in a real-time fashion. What I have is I have these archives. I have these massive archives of photographs on my server, and as you call them up, they build together this interface. So really what's happening is, historically, photography has always been used to lie. I mean, you can't trust the authenticity of an image. And particularly these days of digital photography and with Photoshop, I mean, we know we can doctor up any image. But the really interesting thing that happens is when you have an archive of thousands and thousands and thousands of images that are all time-stamped, you can't possibly replicate that. If you were to try to replicate it, it would take you more time than time exists within that time frame. So what you really have is inversion of time that's taking place. So this has to be accurate. This has to be a documentation. And if it wasn't, if there's some things that are off, all these databases would not match. So these records and those records and those records, you would notice where the gaps were. So in the same sense, I'm hoping that my viewers will take a look at the work and really put themselves from the perspective of the detective, piecing together these information, and hopefully at the end of it, once they piece these things together, they realize, well, wait a minute, this could have been asked of me at any moment. So making that shift from perpetrator to victim. But really, it's not really about victimization. I mean, I sincerely consider the FBI a form of protection, and I really, I'm thrilled that they're willing to look after me. So I think everyone should try to make a deal with them, and I mean, they're the best security guards in the business. I mean, you're talking the elite of the elite of the elite of law enforcement. I mean, how can you go wrong with that? Anyway, so let me pull up a couple of other things. So, and because these do generate randomly, it's hard to tell on some of these. So, for example, this is my banking records. So I hardly use cash these days. So everything is done on credit cards. So you know exactly on November 2nd, 2005, I went to Kmart number 901-90 at 99 Market Street in Philadelphia and spent $22.98. And you can tell where I am just by looking at it because my credit card timestamps, it tracks me. You know that on this date I was here, on this date I was there. We can go further down. And then some really interesting things happen. Well, this is all in New York. Let's go. Oh, by the way, this goes back several years. You can see Florida all of a sudden. Well, I was living in Florida. Let's see, where do we go? Sometimes they get really interesting where I'll be in one day, I'll be in one country, and I'll be in another country. Like this one for, oh no, wait, not that one, sorry. And I have to apologize, because these are pulled up relatively, oh, here's some interesting ones. So for example, we're going from Brunswick, Georgia on the 11th of December at the Flying J truck stop to the 13th of December in Malaysia. And then on the 16th to Bangkok. So obviously I had a flight that I went from the US to Malaysia, to Bangkok via Malaysia. So, I mean, you can piece together a lot of these things. And a lot of these things also, oops. This is images of every meal that I've eaten on the road. I do photograph, as I said, everything. So, but then what you get is you get these relatively cryptic pieces of information. Dakar, 8th of June, and this is what I had there. Some of these are really good. Or we can go to Kuala Lumpur, 12th of December, or 11th of June, Paris for the ass donor kebab. But there's some interesting things that happen. So, for example, 29th of December, I'm in Yogyakarta, and then I'm basically like another day, Berlin, the 28th of December. This doesn't make sense. You can't really get from Berlin to Yogyakarta in one day. And then right after that, we have other things that basically put me back in Asia just a few days before. So really what happens is you have to figure out that these are different dates. They're different years. And there's many years of databases. So again, this type of thing. But really, what I'm really hoping to do is by flooding this information, you're really borrowing a relatively simple economic principle of obviously intelligence agencies operate on a commodity where it's about secrecy and restricted access of information. And as an information artist myself, I decided, well, we work in the same business, except I'm not about secrecy, but I figured by flooding the market, what you basically do is you devalue their currency. And you're basically saying, well, whatever information you have about me isn't worth keeping because everyone else can have it. So really, that's the long roundabout thing, and thank you very much. Appreciate it.